Eleanor, a humble seamstress, agrees to live with her rich son in a mansion in Kensington. There she is received with elegance, but soon realizes she is not welcome. Subtle humiliations and a cruel plan attempt to erase her history and dignity. But on the night of the grand party, the truth comes to light and changes everything before everyone. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you will ever hear in your life. The smell of fresh coffee permeated the small kitchen of the apartment in Harlem, in the north end of New York City. Mrs. Eleanor was finishing breakfast preparations as she looked out the window at the distant bluff. Her 68-year-old calloused hands bore the marks of a lifetime of work. As a skilled seamstress, she had built that home and raised her only son, Bernard, now a successful businessman in the construction industry. The gentle morning breeze brought the aroma of flowers from the small pot of geraniums she kept on the windowsill. They were resilient flowers like her, survivors amidst the concrete of the big city. Eleanor ran her fingers over the newly opened buds in an almost maternal gesture. This was how she cared for everything around her, with delicacy, despite hands roughened by labor. Eleanor still vividly remembered the day she arrived at that apartment more than 4 decades ago. She and Anthony, her late husband, had saved for years to make the down payment on the property. He worked as a construction foreman, and she was already beginning to stand out with her talent for sewing. They dreamed of a home of their own where they could raise the child who was on the way. "This will be our peaceful corner, Eleanor," Anthony had said on that occasion, embracing her waist as they contemplated the still unpainted walls. Little did they know that 3 years later, a sudden illness would take away the dream of a complete family, leaving her alone with a boy of just 4 years to raise. The blue laminate table occupied the center of the modest living room, where carefully stored fabric scraps in shoeboxes shared space with photographs of her son. In one, Bernard wore a graduation gown. In another, he posed smiling next to Deborah, his wife, a woman with impeccably straight hair and always well-manicured nails. In the most recent photo, her grandchildren Lucas and Isabel, 10 and 8 years old respectively, displayed brace-filled smiles in front of the swimming pool of their mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. A small improvised altar on a shelf held other precious memories, the yellowed wedding photo with Anthony, a candle always lit in his memory, the holy card of Our Lady of Guadalupe, the patron saint she turned to in difficult times, and a small crocheted baby shoe she had made for Bernard when he was a baby. These were the treasures that told her story, material fragments of a life built with sacrifice and determination. In the single bedroom, the Singer sewing machine, a faithful companion through so many sleepless nights, occupied a prominent place near the window, where natural light facilitated the meticulous work. It was there that she sewed countless school uniforms, party dresses, graduation suits, and even a neighbor's wedding dress, work that earned her more orders and helped pay for Bernard's engineering college tuition. On the machine, a small radio rested, keeping her company during long hours of work, always tuned to the same popular music station. The phone rang, interrupting the silence that had been her constant companion since she became a widow 15 years ago. "Hello? Mother, is everything ready for tomorrow? The driver will pick you up and your things at 9 a.m. Bernard's voice overflowed with enthusiasm. He had been insisting for months that his mother move to the mansion. "It makes no sense for you to live alone in that small apartment when we have so much space here," he repeated. After much resistance, Eleanor finally accepted, motivated by the desire to be closer to her grandchildren. "Everything's ready, my son. I've already packed my things. It's not much anyway." "Great. Deborah prepared a beautiful room for you. You'll love it, Mother. It's the beginning of a new life. You deserve to rest after so much sacrifice." After hanging up the phone, Eleanor looked at the few packed suitcases. She would take only the essentials: some clothes, family portraits, the old sewing machine, and the box with thread and needles. "It's my whole life," she thought, caressing the fabric of the dress she would wear the next day. A simple dress made by her own hands, but which she considered elegant enough for her arrival at the new house. The decision to leave that apartment had not been easy. It was the place where she had raised her son, where she had faced nights of worry when money barely covered rent and food, where she had celebrated each of Bernard's achievements: first place in the college entrance exam, the internship at the construction company that would later hire him, the promotion to manager when he was only 26. On the walls, the pencil marks that recorded Bernard's growth were still visible, like silent witnesses of a time that would not return. The neighbors with whom she had shared so many stories, Mrs. Martha from the apartment next door, who always brought her treats during holiday parties, Mr. Joaquin from the ground floor, who fixed small electrical problems without ever charging, young Louise from the third floor, who came almost daily for coffee and to vent about life. Eleanor walked slowly through the rooms as if in a silent farewell. She stopped before the living room window, from where she could see the school where Bernard had studied, the makeshift soccer field where he had played so many times, the church where she lit candles on Anthony's departure anniversaries. "Am I doing the right thing?" she murmured to herself, as she put utility bills and apartment documents in an envelope. Bernard had insisted that she not worry about any of it, that he would take care of everything from now on, but Eleanor, accustomed to managing her life alone for so many years, felt a pang of insecurity in giving up that control. The next morning, the driver, a man in an immaculate uniform named Charles, arrived punctually. He treated her with formal respect as he placed her suitcases in the trunk of the luxurious car. "Mrs. Eleanor, would you like to take one last look at the apartment?" Charles asked, noticing her hesitation as she closed the door. "No, thank you," she replied firmly, though her heart tightened as she turned the key in the lock. "Sometimes we need to move forward, don't we?" During the journey, Eleanor watched the contrasting landscapes of New York City through the window. They left the lower middle-class neighborhood and crossed the city towards Greenwich, Connecticut, where modern skyscrapers and luxury condominiums painted a reality completely different from what she was used to. They passed through downtown, where Eleanor recognized the fabric store where she had bought her materials for decades. The owner, a Lebanese gentleman named Ibrahim, always reserved the best scraps for her at special prices. "For my best customer, who works magic with needle and thread," he used to say. "So many stories, so many faces left behind." "First time at the boss's house, Mrs. Eleanor?" Charles asked, trying to strike up a conversation. "I've visited a few times, but to live there it's the first," she replied, clutching her purse in her lap. A strange sensation grew in her chest, a mixture of anxiety and apprehension. "It's a beautiful house," Charles commented. "Dr. Bernard is very respected by all the staff. Mrs. Deborah, well, she keeps everything running like clockwork." Eleanor caught the hesitation in the driver's voice when he mentioned her daughter-in-law, but chose not to comment. Bernard seemed so happy with Deborah, and she would never interfere with her son's happiness. As they approached Greenwich, Connecticut, the houses became larger, the walls taller, the streets wider and tree-lined. The contrast with the neighborhood she came from was so striking that Eleanor felt as if she were entering another world, a world where she was just a temporary visitor. Upon arrival, Eleanor contemplated the imposing mansion. 3 stories of modern architecture, high walls and an electronic gate that slowly opened, revealing an impeccably manicured garden. The fountain in the center of the garden seemed to dance to the rhythm of the crystal-clear water. Bernard waited at the door, dressed in a business suit, even though it was Saturday. Tall with graying hair at his temples, he embraced his mother tightly. "Welcome to your new home, Mother. Here you will have everything you've always deserved." As they entered the house, the marble floor reflected the natural light streaming through the wide windows. Furniture that seemed never to have been used filled the rooms, and artworks decorated the white walls. The place where every object seemed to have its exact, meticulously thought-out place. Deborah appeared at the top of the stairs. She wore light-tailored trousers and a silk blouse. Her heels echoed on the floor as she gracefully descended the steps. Her smile, though perfectly sculpted, did not reach her eyes. "So glad you arrived, Mrs. Eleanor." Deborah approached, hugging her briefly. "I hope you feel at home. Bernard hasn't stopped talking about it for weeks." The grandchildren ran down, hugging their grandmother with the spontaneity that only children possess. "Grandma, come see my room." "I have a new video game," exclaimed Lucas. "First we'll show Grandma's room," Deborah interrupted, her voice firm but polite. They went up to the second floor. The room assigned to Eleanor was spacious, with a king-size bed, heavy, fine fabric curtains, and a view of the back garden. "It's beautiful," Eleanor murmured, feeling small in such a large space. I had it specially decorated for you, Mother. It has everything you need. Eleanor noticed that the room, despite being luxurious, was at the opposite end from the other. Family members' rooms. Lunch will be served in an hour, Deborah informed. I'll leave you to settle in comfortably. When everyone left, Eleanor sat on the edge of the immense bed. She took off her worn shoes and felt the soft carpet under her feet. She walked to the window and observed the garden, where a middle-aged man cared for the plants with dedication. She began to unpack, organizing her few clothes in the immense closet that looked more like an empty department store. As she placed her small sewing machine on the dressing table, she hesitated. Perhaps that simple object would clash with the sophisticated decor, but it was part of her identity, of her story. During lunch, served by a uniformed maid named Rita, Bernard spoke enthusiastically about business, while Deborah commented on their upcoming trip to Chicago. Unfortunately, I have to travel next week, Mother, Bernard explained. Some investors interested in our ventures in Chicago. Don't worry, son. I'm used to being alone. You won't be alone, Bernard smiled. You have Deborah, the children, the staff. You'll feel at home in no time. Eleanor noticed the quick glance Deborah gave her husband. It was only a second, but enough to perceive discomfort. After lunch, Bernard took his mother to see the entire property. The swimming pool, the private gym, the office where he worked when he was home. With each new room, Eleanor felt more out of place, as if visiting a museum where she couldn't touch anything. And here's the main kitchen, Bernard explained, showing the immense space with professional equipment. Regina is our chef. She comes every day to prepare meals. A woman in a white uniform smiled gently. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Eleanor. Mr. Bernard talks a lot about you. Eleanor returned the smile. It was the first one that seemed genuine since she arrived. If you want to prepare something special, feel free, Regina added. Upon returning to the living room, they found Deborah on the phone, discussing the details of a charity gala she would organize in the coming weeks. It will be the event of the year, she commented after hanging up. All the top brass of partner companies will be here, plus some important politicians. My wife has a talent for public relations, Bernard explained to his mother. Half the contracts we close start at the parties she organizes. Eleanor merely smiled, noticing how her son looked at his wife with admiration. That night, in her new room, Eleanor tried to get used to the mattress, which was too soft for her back accustomed to firmness. Through the window, she saw the city lights in the distance and felt a pang of longing for her old apartment, where the noise of neighbors and the smell of bread from the corner bakery were part of her routine. It's only a matter of time until I get used to it, she thought, trying to push away the growing feeling that perhaps she didn't belong in that world of luxury and appearances. Bernard wants the best for me. I am finally reaping the rewards of so much sacrifice. She fell asleep imagining what her new life would be like in that home that promised to be a paradise after so many years of struggle. Little did she know that behind the polite smiles and impeccable marble walls, the shadow of resentment was only beginning to reveal itself, ready to swallow her dignity when she least expected it. The first few days in the mansion passed without major incidents for Eleanor. Mornings began with coffee served on the terrace. Afternoons passed slowly between conversations with her grandchildren and short strolls in the garden. Bernard, always busy with meetings and phone calls, managed at least to have dinner with the family most days. It was in the first week, after Bernard announced his business trip to Chicago, that Eleanor noticed the first change in Deborah's behavior. Darling, do you really need to go personally? I thought you'd send Morris this time, Deborah asked, pouring herself wine during dinner. They are important investors, love. They want to talk directly with me, Bernard replied, checking messages on his phone. It will only be 3 days. What about the charity gala? I need you here for the preparations. You always organize everything perfectly. I trust your good taste. Deborah smiled, but her eyes revealed discontent. She glanced briefly at Eleanor, who was trying to help Isabel cut a piece of meat. Let Regina help, Mrs. Eleanor, Deborah said in a controlled voice. We don't want you to get tired. It's no trouble at all. I like helping my granddaughter. But the food might get cold while you help, Deborah insisted. She made a discreet gesture and Rita approached to take over the task. Eleanor recoiled, feeling strangely reprimanded. She realized it was the first time Deborah had spoken directly to her since they sat down at the table. On the morning of Bernard's departure, Eleanor woke up earlier than usual. She went down to the kitchen, where Regina was preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor. You're up early today." "I wanted to prepare a special breakfast for my son before his trip. He always liked my cheese bread." Regina smiled, indicating the ingredients. "Feel free. The kitchen is all yours." With pleasure, Eleanor prepared the dough as she had for decades. The familiar aroma filled the modern kitchen, bringing a bit of her identity to that impersonal space. Bernard came down shortly after, already dressed for his trip, and smiled when he smelled it. "Mother's cheese bread. This is how you start the day right." He hugged Eleanor affectionately and sat down to enjoy the coffee she had prepared. Deborah appeared minutes later, already made up and impeccably dressed, despite the early hour. "I didn't know we'd have a special menu today," she commented, observing the cheese breads in the basket. She poured herself a cup of coffee, ignoring the food. "Mrs. Eleanor woke up early to prepare it," Regina explained. "How dedicated," Deborah replied with a formal smile. "But we need to be careful not to disrupt the staff's routine too much, don't we?" Bernard, oblivious to the growing tension, praised the food. "Mother, you haven't lost your touch. This reminds me of my childhood." After Bernard's departure, Eleanor noticed a subtle change in the atmosphere of the house. During lunch, Deborah informed her that she would be dining out with friends. "Rita will leave something prepared for you in the refrigerator. The children will eat earlier because they have homework." "I can help with their homework," Eleanor offered, excited by the possibility of being useful. "It won't be necessary. The private tutor comes at 7. If you want to watch television, you can use the one in the staff lounge. I'll be receiving some people to discuss the party decoration, and we'll need the main living room." That night, Eleanor ate alone in the immense kitchen, listening to distant voices and laughter coming from the main living room. Afterward, she retired to her room earlier than usual. The next morning, upon going down for coffee, she found a note from Deborah on the table. "Mrs. Eleanor, I had to leave early to take care of party matters. The staff have their assigned tasks. Please do not interfere with their routine. If you need anything, communicate with Rita." Eleanor felt the weight of those words. "Do not interfere," as if she were a stranger, an unwelcome guest. During the day, she noticed pitying glances from some staff members. Rita was especially kind, bringing her tea without being asked and chatting briefly when possible. "You sew, don't you?" Rita asked, noticing the box of threads Eleanor kept next to the armchair. "Since I was a girl. That's how I supported my son after my husband passed away." "My mother is also a seamstress," Rita smiled. "Perhaps you could teach me some stitches in your free time?" That small show of interest warmed Eleanor's heart. Of course it would be a pleasure. In the afternoon, while trying to find her grandchildren for a snack, Eleanor was intercepted by Helen, the children's nanny. "Excuse me, Mrs. Eleanor," but Mrs. Deborah left instructions for the children to study until 5. Then they have English class. "Can't I even see them for a little while?" Helen seemed embarrassed. "You can see them at dinner, Mrs. Deborah's orders." Frustrated, Eleanor decided to walk in the garden. That's when she met Anthony, the middle-aged gardener who cared for the plants with artisanal dedication. "You're Dr. Bernard's mother, aren't you?" "He talks a lot about you." "I am. It's funny to hear my son called doctor. To me, he's still that boy who ran barefoot." Anthony smiled. "The best people never forget where they came from. Dr. Bernard always treats me with respect. Unlike—" He interrupted the sentence, realizing he might have said too much. "Unlike other people," Eleanor completed, understanding the unspoken. "These are rare orchids." Anthony changed the subject, showing delicate flowers. "I need a light touch to care for them, like a seamstress's." "How do you know I'm a seamstress?" "Dr. Bernard mentioned it. He said the most beautiful clothes he ever had were made by you." That memory brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. Her son still remembered, still proud of his humble origins. At dinner, Deborah returned accompanied by her sister, Christine, a woman a few years younger, but with the same calculating air. "So this is the famous mother-in-law," exclaimed Christine, examining Eleanor with thinly veiled curiosity. "Deborah has told me so much about you." "I hope good things," Eleanor replied, trying to maintain her good humor. "Oh, of course. How could it be otherwise?" Christine exchanged a knowing look with her sister. It must be wonderful to finally rest after so many years of struggle, isn't it? To have everything done, everything served. During dinner, the sisters conversed as if Eleanor were not present, discussing people she didn't know and events to which she would never be invited. The grandchildren, tired after a day of activities, barely spoke. "The children need to sleep early tonight," Deborah announced even before dessert. "They have an assessment at school tomorrow." "Can I at least say good night to them in their room?" Eleanor asked. "Better not, Mrs. Eleanor. When they get excited with you, it takes them longer to fall asleep," Deborah replied firmly. "Helen has a specific routine for putting them to bed." After the children left, Christine began talking about the charity gala. "All the important contacts will be there. Deb, it's your chance to show what the Mendonça family represents in New York City's high society. I'm planning every detail. The buffet will be international, the decor exclusive, and I managed to get that band that played at the Vasconcellos' wedding." "And the mother-in-law? Are you going to introduce her to your social circle?" Christine asked with feigned innocence. Deborah hesitated for a second. Of course, everyone wants to meet Bernard's mother. Later, alone in her room, Eleanor wrote in a small notebook she had brought, "Second day without Bernard. I feel like something isn't right. Deborah acts as if I'm invisible when we're alone, but in front of others, especially the staff, she makes a point of appearing attentive. The children seem so busy I barely see them. I try not to mind after all, I'm just adapting to a new routine." The next morning, Eleanor came down a little later and found no one in the kitchen. Regina informed her that Deborah had gone out early with the children for an appointment and would only return in the afternoon. Feeling bored and useless, Eleanor asked Rita to show her where they kept the cleaning supplies. "What for, Mrs. Eleanor?" "I want to clean my room. I've always liked doing it myself." Rita seemed hesitant. "Mrs. Deborah doesn't like us to alter the cleaning routine. Mariana is responsible for the rooms. But it's my room. I don't want to bother anyone." Reluctantly, Rita showed her where the products were. Eleanor spent the morning meticulously tidying her space, feeling at least a small sense of control over something in that immense house. When she finished, she decided to prepare a cornmeal cake, another recipe Bernard loved in childhood. Perhaps it could please the grandchildren too. She was finishing the dough when Deborah returned, accompanied again by Christine. "What's going on here?" Deborah asked, visibly displeased at seeing flour and ingredients scattered across the impeccable counter. "I'm making a cake for afternoon snack," Eleanor explained. "Regina is responsible for the kitchen." "Mrs. Eleanor, we've already discussed not interfering with the staff's routine." "I'm not interfering. I'm just—" "Besides," Deborah interrupted, "the children follow a special diet. No refined sugar, white flour, or excessive dairy." Eleanor felt her face burn with shame. Christine watched the scene with a faint smile at the corner of her lips. "I'm sorry." "I didn't know. Don't worry." Deborah softened her tone, noticing that Rita was discreetly observing the conversation. "It's natural that you want to help, but we have a system here. For everyone's good, we need to respect it." That afternoon, as she retreated to her room feeling increasingly out of place, Eleanor found one of the orchids Anthony cared for in the garden on her bed, delicately placed in a small vase. There was no note, but she knew who had left that silent gift. It was a reminder that even on hostile ground, there would always be someone capable of seeing beyond appearances. In her notebook, she wrote, "Third day without Bernard. Today I understood that I am not welcome in the kitchen, nor can I decide how to clean my own room. I miss my freedom, my simple corner where I was queen. But complaints won't solve anything. Tomorrow will be a new day." What Eleanor didn't imagine was that, behind the silk curtains and polite smiles, the true nature of that contempt was only beginning to reveal itself. The shadow of pride grew silently, ready to swallow her dignity when she least expected it. Bernard's return brought temporary relief for Eleanor. The house seemed to come alive again with his presence, and Deborah maintained her impeccable behavior when her husband was around. During the welcome dinner, she even allowed Eleanor to serve the cornmeal cake she had prepared that morning, presenting it as a special recipe my mother-in-law insisted on making. "It's divine, Mother," Bernard praised, serving himself another slice. "It tastes just like my childhood." "Grandma makes the best cake in the world," exclaimed Lucas, his mouth smeared with crumbs. Deborah smiled, but her eyes remained cold. Too bad the children can't eat too much sugar at night. They get restless at bedtime. An exception won't hurt, love, Bernard replied, unconcerned. After all, it's not every day I come back from a trip. The brief moment of harmony was interrupted when Bernard announced that he would need to travel again the following week, this time for 7 days. 7 days? Deborah questioned, visibly annoyed. What about the charity gala? I'll be back a day before, I promise. And you always organize everything perfectly. Eleanor noticed the growing tension on her daughter-in-law's face. Her vein pulsed discreetly at her temple, despite the frozen smile. That night, Eleanor heard raised voices coming from the couple's bedroom. She couldn't distinguish the words, but Deborah's accusatory tone was evident. In the morning, Bernard looked tired during breakfast, while Deborah maintained a silence laden with resentment. Mother, Bernard said before leaving for the office, I wanted to talk to you about something. They sat on the terrace, enjoying the morning breeze and the distant ocean view. Deborah told me you've been interfering with the house routine. He began, carefully choosing his words. Eleanor felt a tightening in her chest. Son, I was just trying to help. I made a cake. I wanted to clean my room. I know, Mother, and I understand you have your way of doing things. But here we have staff for that. Deborah manages the house very carefully, and a change in routine ends up affecting everyone. So I can't even make coffee or a cake for my grandchildren, Eleanor questioned, feeling her eyes well up. Bernard held her calloused hands affectionately. Of course you can, Mother. Just arrange it with Regina beforehand. Or do it when you're with the children as a special activity. Eleanor nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. And another thing, Bernard continued, Deborah mentioned you tried to help Lucas with his math homework. He was struggling, and I always helped you when you were little. Yes, and I'm eternally grateful for that. But now Lucas has private tutors, specific methods. How far did you go in school, Mother? 4th grade, Eleanor replied, feeling the weight of that question. So you understand what I mean. Methods have changed a lot. It's better to leave their formal education to the professionals. Eleanor lowered her head, feeling unqualified and useless. Bernard, noticing her sadness, hastened to add, Mother, you are very important to them. You can tell stories, teach values, traditions. No one does that better than you. After Bernard left for work, Eleanor remained on the terrace for some time, contemplating the immensity of the ocean and feeling increasingly smaller in that world that didn't truly embrace her. She was so absorbed in thought that she didn't notice Deborah approaching. Bernard talked to you? Eleanor turned, discreetly wiping away a stubborn tear. Yes, he explained everything. Good. So I hope you now understand your place in this house, Deborah said, without mincing words. Her voice, once sweetened in her husband's presence, now carried a cutting tone. My place? Eleanor repeated, surprised by the change in attitude. Yes, your place. You are here because Bernard insisted, out of pure filial charity. But this is my house, these are my children, and it's my reputation at stake with every event I host. Eleanor felt as if she had been slapped. Deborah, I just want to help. Help? With all due respect, Mrs. Eleanor, what could a semi-illiterate seamstress from the suburbs add to my home? The words fell like stones on Eleanor, who shrank in her chair. I'll be direct, Deborah continued, approaching. While Bernard is home, make sure to smile and pretend everything is fine. In front of the staff, keep up appearances. But don't be mistaken into thinking you have any power here. Before Eleanor could respond, Christine arrived on the terrace, interrupting the conversation. Am I interrupting? She asked with feigned innocence. Not at all, Deborah replied, instantly returning to her polite tone. I was just explaining some house details to Mrs. Eleanor. The following days were marked by small humiliations that combined formed an unbearable weight. Eleanor discovered that her blood pressure medication had disappeared from her nightstand. When she mentioned it, Deborah suggested that perhaps she was getting a little confused, and that it would be better for Rita to control her medications. During a lunch with Deborah's friends, Eleanor was introduced as Bernard's mother, whom we took in out of charity. The guests looked at her with curiosity, as if she were an exotic exhibit. She had never seen a house like this before, commented Christine, who had become a constant presence in the mansion. On the first day, she was so enchanted by the chandelier that she almost tripped on the Persian rug. The polite laughter that followed cut Eleanor like blades. On another occasion, Eleanor discovered that her clothes had been removed from the closet and replaced with new expensive pieces, but totally out of her style and comfort. Her old clothes were donated without her permission. I couldn't let her wear those rags, Deborah justified when confronted. What would the neighbors think? Besides, it was a gift. You should be grateful instead of complaining. The sewing machine, which Eleanor cherished so much, was accidentally damaged during a cleaning. When Eleanor expressed her sadness, Deborah offered to buy a new, ultra-modern one. What for? You don't need to sew anymore. Leave that to professional seamstresses. It was as if every object, every memory, every trace of her identity was being systematically eliminated. The children, who initially showed enthusiasm for their grandmother's presence, now barely had time for her. Their packed schedule of extracurricular activities and social engagements kept them away from home most of the time. When she finally managed some time with her grandchildren, Eleanor noticed the watchful eyes of Helen, the nanny, who seemed to have specific instructions to monitor these interactions. One afternoon, Eleanor found Isabel crying, hidden in the garden. "What's wrong, my love?" she asked, sitting beside her granddaughter on the stone bench. "Mommy said I can't wear the dress you made for me to the party." Eleanor was surprised. She had managed to sew a simple dress for her granddaughter, using scraps that Anthony had secretly brought her. "Why not?" "She said it's ugly and looks like poor people's clothes," the girl sobbed. "But I thought it was beautiful, Grandma." Eleanor hugged her granddaughter, feeling a mixture of sadness and indignation. "Sometimes, my dear, people confuse value with price. Your dress was made with love, and that is priceless." Helen appeared shortly after, calling Isabel for her piano lesson. She gave Eleanor a warning look, as if she had caught her committing a crime. Eleanor's only solace was her moments in the garden with Anthony and quick conversations with Rita when no one was around. It was they who alerted her to the comments Deborah and Christine were spreading among the neighbors. "They say you have mental problems and that Dr. Bernard brought you home because no one else would take care of you," Rita whispered, while helping Eleanor organize her new clothes. "And there's more," Anthony added on another occasion. "Mrs. Deborah has been telling friends that the house you lived in was a filthy tenement and that Dr. Bernard saved you from a degrading situation." Each new revelation was a stab to Eleanor's heart. How could they distort her story so much? Her home had always been simple but impeccably clean, and she never needed anyone's charity. It was her own work that supported her family after her husband's early departure. The week of Bernard's trip arrived, bringing with it the intensification of humiliations. On the eve of his departure, he gathered the family for a special dinner. "I want you to take good care of my mother while I'm away," he asked, looking especially at Deborah. "She is our most precious treasure." Deborah smiled, squeezing her husband's hand across the table. "Don't worry, darling. Your mother will be treated exactly as she deserves." As soon as Bernard's car disappeared around the corner the next morning, Deborah's mask of kindness completely dropped. The first blow came during breakfast. "From now on, Mrs. Eleanor, you will have your meals in the kitchen with the staff. The dining room will be occupied with preparations for the charity gala." "But the gala isn't for another 5 days?" Eleanor questioned. "Exactly. And there's a lot to be done until then." Christine, who now practically lived in the mansion, added, "It will be better for you too. You'll feel more at ease with people, shall we say, of your level." That same afternoon, Eleanor discovered that the room she occupied would be temporarily transformed into a storage area for the party's floral arrangements. "You can use the staff room on the ground floor," Deborah informed. "It's small, but it should remind you of home." The room was in fact tiny, a cubicle with a single bed, a small wardrobe, and a window that overlooked the neighbor's wall. There was no air conditioning, only a noisy fan on the ceiling. As she arranged her few belongings in the new space, Eleanor felt dizzy. The humiliation was too great to bear. She sat on the edge of the bed, breathing deeply to control her rising blood pressure. Without her medication, which remained lost, the discomfort only worsened. Rita appeared at the door, bringing a glass of water and her medicine. "I found it hidden in Mrs. Deborah's cabinet," she whispered. "Take it quickly and don't say I brought it." "Why is she doing this to me, Rita?" The maid sat beside Eleanor, checking first to see if anyone was watching them. "Mrs. Deborah is ashamed of her origins. Her parents were middle-class merchants who lost everything in a scam. She worked as a secretary before meeting Dr. Bernard, But she invented a story that she comes from a traditional New York City family. She's terrified that someone will discover the truth. Eleanor wiped a tear. And I am living proof that my son came from humble beginnings. Exactly. You are a mirror she doesn't want to look into. That night, alone in the small room, Eleanor wrote in her diary, "Today I understood that it's not just about jealousy or a bid for attention. It's deeper. Deborah doesn't hate who I am. She hates what I represent. Every time she looks at my calloused hands, she remembers her own past that she fights so hard to forget. My presence is a constant reminder that appearances can be constructed, that status is a mask. And there's nothing she fears more than having her mask torn off." She tucked the notebook under the thin mattress and tried to sleep. But the noise of the impromptu party Christine had organized by the pool wouldn't allow it. Drunken voices and exaggerated laughter echoed across the property. Tomorrow would be another day, and the silent war was only beginning to show its cruelest weapons. The days leading up to the charity gala transformed the mansion into a hive of frantic activity. Decorators, florists, lighting technicians, and catering staff circulated through the rooms, turning every space into an extension of Deborah's vanity. Imported orchids, ice sculptures, French crystals, nothing was enough to impress the New York City elite who would be present. For Eleanor, confined to the back room, each day became more suffocating than the last. The few times she tried to move around the house, she was discreetly told by a staff member not to disrupt the preparations. "Could you stay in your room until the party?" Deborah asked in one of her rare, direct interactions. "The vendors are busy and your presence causes distraction." 3 days before the party, Eleanor had a moment of joy when she received a call from Bernard. She answered the phone that Rita had secretly brought her, as the phone in her room had been temporarily disconnected for sound system installation. "Mother, how are you?" "I miss you." Bernard's voice sounded warm on the other end of the line. "I'm fine, son," Eleanor lied, not wanting to worry him. "And the party preparations?" Deborah must be frantic with so many details. "Everything looks very nice," she replied vaguely. "I have a surprise for you. I bought a special gift in Chicago. Something for you to wear to the party." Eleanor's heart raced. "To the party? I'm going to participate?" "Of course, Mother. It's the social event of the year. The whole family will be there. You'll be the guest of honor." After the call, Eleanor felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. Perhaps the party would be an opportunity to finally be accepted, to show that she too could be part of that world. She began to plan how she would dress, what posture she would adopt, what topics she could discuss with guests without appearing ignorant or out of place. Her momentary excitement was interrupted when Christine entered the room without knocking, carrying a large box. "Deborah chose what you'll wear to the party," she announced, placing the box on the bed. She said to try it on to see if it needs adjustments. Inside the box, Eleanor found a drab grey dress of cheap synthetic fabric and a pair of low-heeled shoes that seemed at least 2 sizes too big for her feet. A set of vulgar-looking costume jewelry completed the look. "But this doesn't seem appropriate for such an elegant party," Eleanor commented, confused. Christine smiled maliciously. "It's exactly what Deborah thinks is suitable for you. We don't want you to look like you're trying to be something you're not, do we?" When Eleanor tried on the dress, she realized it was intentionally loose in the shoulders and tight at the waist, creating an inelegant silhouette. The shoes, as she suspected, were too big, making her almost trip when walking. "Perfect," Christine exclaimed with false enthusiasm. "Now all that's missing is the final touch." She pulled a bottle of cheap-looking perfume from her bag, a special gift from Deborah. "She insists you wear it to the party." After Christine left, Eleanor picked up the dress and examined the poorly made seams, the questionable quality fabric. With her sewing knowledge, she immediately recognized this was not a store-bought item, but something intentionally poorly crafted to ridicule her. She opened the perfume bottle and smelled a strong, unpleasant odor, nothing like the delicate fragrances Deborah used. It was a carefully planned humiliation. That night, unable to sleep, Eleanor went for a walk in the garden. The house was finally silent after a day of preparations. She found Anthony sitting on a bench despite the late hour. "Can't sleep." "Mrs. Eleanor, I have a lot on my mind," she replied, sitting beside him. I heard about the dress, the gardener commented. Rita told me. What they're doing to you is inhumane. Why doesn't anyone tell my son the truth? Anthony sighed deeply. Everyone is afraid of losing their job. Deborah has made it clear that anyone who gets close to you or tells Bernard anything will be fired immediately, and with the market as it is. I understand. I don't want to harm anyone. But I'm thinking of doing something, Anthony confessed, lowering his voice even further. I've recorded some conversations on my phone, moments when Deborah talks about you when she thinks no one is listening. Eleanor's eyes widened. Don't do that, Anthony. I don't want you to risk yourself for me. Some injustices are too great for us to stay silent, Mrs. Eleanor. On the eve of the party, the tension in the house reached unbearable levels. Deborah, hysterical with the final details, shouted at staff and suppliers for any minor imperfection. Christine followed her like a shadow, feeding her paranoia that something would go wrong. Eleanor tried to remain invisible, but was called to the main living room where Deborah was inspecting the final decoration. Ah, Mrs. Eleanor, I need to decide where you will be during the party, Deborah said, consulting a diagram of the table arrangement. Bernard said I would be a guest of honor, Eleanor commented timidly. Deborah and Christine exchanged glances before discreetly laughing. Of course, Mrs. Eleanor, and you will be, at the appropriate time. What does that mean? It means, Deborah explained with false patience, that you will stay in your room until you are called. We don't want you to get tired or confused with so much movement, but I wanted to greet my son when he arrives. He will want to rest from his trip before the party. It will be better for everyone if you only appear when you are introduced. Eleanor began to understand the plan. She would be displayed as a curiosity, a symbol of Deborah's charity in taking in her humble mother-in-law. Her stomach churned with the realization. Back in her room, she found Rita, quietly tidying her few clothes. Mrs. Eleanor, I need to tell you something, the maid whispered, making sure no one heard them. I overheard Mrs. Deborah and Mrs. Christine talking. They're planning something to humiliate you at the party. Eleanor felt a chill. What kind of thing? I'm not sure, but they mentioned it would be the final blow and that after that, Doctor, Bernard would understand that you can't stay here. That night, the last before the party, the mansion finally fell silent after a frantic day of preparations. Eleanor couldn't sleep, tossing and turning in the narrow bed as her mind raced through all the humiliations of the past few days and what was yet to come. Around midnight, she heard raised voices coming from the upper floor. The staff party to set up the final decorations had ended, and most had already left, leaving only those who slept on the property. The female voices echoed through the service. Corridor. It was Deborah and Christine, clearly intoxicated, after a tasting of the wines for the party. Moved by an impulse, Eleanor got up and followed the sound. She found them in the kitchen, pouring themselves more glasses while laughing loudly. She actually believes she'll be introduced as a guest of honor, Christine guffawed. Did you see the dress I picked out? It looks like a potato sack, and the perfume. I bought it at the dollar store downtown, Deborah added. The plan is perfect, sister. When Bernard sees the spectacle she'll make in front of all the important contacts, he'll have no choice but to send her back to that cubicle she called home. If it even still exists. The realtor already assured me he found a buyer for the apartment. I signed the papers as Bernard's power of attorney last week. Eleanor froze behind the door. They had sold her apartment, the only place that was truly hers, without her permission? She has nowhere to go back to, Deborah continued. I'm thinking of suggesting a nursing home. I know a very cheap one in the Bronx. It's not luxurious, but for someone who sewed to survive, it must seem like a palace. The two laughed louder, completely oblivious to Eleanor's presence. Christine raised her glass in a toast. To tomorrow's party. The end of the little maid who dared to give birth to a man too rich for her. Feeling her heart pound and her vision blur, Eleanor retreated silently. Bile rose in her throat as the cruel words echoed in her mind. It was worse than she imagined. It wasn't just humiliation, but a meticulous plan to permanently separate her from her son and grandchildren, to erase her existence as if she were a shameful stain. Back in her room, Her hands trembled so much she could barely hold the glass of water. Without her blood pressure medication, she felt her heart dangerously pounding in her chest. The feeling of powerlessness was overwhelming. It was then that she noticed something new on the small table in the room. An old cell phone and a handwritten note. "I recorded everything. It's time for the truth. Anthony." With trembling fingers, Eleanor picked up the device. There were several audio files and even some videos. In one, clearly filmed secretly, Deborah instructed Helen to keep the children away from their grandmother. In another, she talked to a friend about how humiliating it was to have a semi-illiterate person living in her house. The most recent file was from a few hours ago, the conversation in the kitchen that Eleanor had just witnessed. Silent tears streamed down her face as she listened to the concrete proof of her daughter-in-law's calculated cruelty. For a moment she felt the impulse to send everything to Bernard immediately, to expose the whole charade. But something stopped her. No, she thought. If he knows this now, the fight will be ugly, and the children will suffer. She decided to wait. Bernard would arrive in the morning, a few hours before the party. She would talk to him personally, show him the evidence, but ask him to act calmly for the love of their children. She tucked the phone under her pillow and, emotionally exhausted, finally managed to fall asleep. Her last thought was a prayer that her son would see the truth without her having to destroy the image he had of his family. What Eleanor didn't know was that while she slept, other events were unfolding in the house. Rita, moved by guilt for having remained silent for so long, sent an anonymous message to Bernard's cell phone, alerting him to the treatment his mother had been receiving. Anthony, in turn, had shared some of the recordings with other staff members, creating a silent network of allies ready to defend Eleanor. And in a hotel in downtown New York, Bernard, who had unexpectedly returned early without telling anyone, read Rita's message with growing horror as a storm of indignation brewed in his chest. The next morning would bring more than the eagerly awaited charity gala. It would bring the inevitable confrontation between truth and appearances, between love and betrayal, between genuine simplicity and empty pride. And no one, absolutely no one, was prepared for the consequences. The morning of the party dawned with a surprisingly clear sky for an autumn day in New York City. The first rays of sun filtered through the curtains of the small room where Eleanor had spent a restless night, alternating between nightmares and moments of agonizing lucidity. She got up even before the first staff members began to circulate through the house. Her body ached, a result of accumulated tension and the uncomfortable bed. The cell phone Anthony had given her remained safe under her pillow, the concrete proof of the cruelty she had been silently enduring. As she washed her face at the small sink in the attached bathroom, Eleanor observed her reflection in the mirror. The marks of time and recent suffering had deepened, but her eyes still held the dignity that no humiliation had managed to strip away. She made a decision. No matter what happened at that party, she would not allow them to destroy what remained of her self-respect. Around 8 in the morning, Rita appeared with a breakfast tray. "Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor. I brought you a special breakfast. You'll need strength today." There was something different in the maid's expression, a mixture of nervousness and expectation that did not go unnoticed by Eleanor. "Has something happened, Rita?" The young woman hesitated before replying in a low voice. "Dr. Bernard arrived early. He's in the office with Mrs. Deborah now. He seems tense." Eleanor's heart raced. "Does he know something already?" "I'm not sure, but he arrived by surprise, around 6 in the morning. He didn't seem happy." Before they could continue their conversation, they heard raised voices coming from the upper floor. Bernard's voice, usually controlled, echoed through the corridors in a tone Eleanor had rarely heard, deeply indignant. Rita hurried out. "I need to go back before they notice my absence. Stay here, Mrs. Eleanor. When the time is right, I'll come get you." Alone again, Eleanor tried to drink her coffee, but the lump in her throat made it difficult to swallow anything. The voices continued, now more distant, probably coming from the office on the 3rd floor. Occasionally, she distinguished Deborah's voice in a defensive and increasingly agitated tone. The morning progressed with the house in a flurry. Bernard's early arrival had not altered the party preparations. On the contrary, they seemed even more frantic. Suppliers came and went, staff rushed back and forth, and the test music from the sound system occasionally filled the air. Around noon, someone knocked on the door. It was Christine, visibly irritated and with deep dark circles under her eyes. "So there you are after all," she said, entering uninvited. "Deborah has been looking everywhere. What does she want with me?" "Instructions for tonight, obviously." "The party starts at 8, but you'll only come down at 9:30 when Bernard gives the official speech. Until then, you should stay here." "Bernard has arrived, hasn't he?" I heard his voice. Christine hesitated for a second. "Yes, he arrived earlier than expected. He's resting now." The way she averted her gaze when she answered made it clear to Eleanor that something was happening. This was not the same confident and cruel Christine of previous days. "Can I talk to my son?" "Absolutely not." The answer came quickly and aggressively. "He is extremely busy with the final details of the party. And Deborah made it clear that you should only appear at the agreed time." After Christine left, Eleanor remained restless. The silence that followed the raised voices of the morning was even more disturbing. She decided she would not stay confined in that room until night. She needed to find Bernard, talk to him, find out what was going on. Cautiously, she left the room and followed the service corridor that led to the kitchen. The house seemed strangely empty for a day of so many preparations. In the kitchen, she found only Regina, the chef, supervising 2 assistants. "Mrs. Eleanor, you shouldn't be here," Regina warned, looking nervously at the doors. "Where is everyone? Where is my son?" "Dr. Bernard left with Mrs. Deborah about an hour ago." They seemed to be arguing seriously. "And the children?" "Helen took them to their maternal grandmother's house. They'll only return for the party." The absence of the entire family made Eleanor even more apprehensive. She decided to use that moment to retrieve something very important: the wool shawl Bernard had given her for her last birthday, and which Deborah had confiscated days earlier, claiming it didn't match the house decor. She knew it was stored in the closet of the master bedroom. Discreetly ascending the back stairs, Eleanor reached the corridor leading to the master suite. The door was ajar, which was unusual. With a racing heart, she entered the impeccably tidy room. The closet was to the right, a mirrored door that reflected all the opulence of the environment. Inside the enormous closet, organized by color and season, were Deborah's expensive outfits. In the back, a small dresser held accessories. It was there that Eleanor found her shawl, folded and hidden under silk scarves. As she picked it up, she noticed she wasn't alone. Reflected in the closet mirror, Anthony watched her from the bedroom door. "Mrs. Eleanor, you shouldn't be here." "I just came to get what's mine." "Anthony." The gardener entered, closing the door behind him. "There's something you need to know. Dr. Bernard heard everything." "What do you mean?" "Last night, when I recorded Mrs. Deborah's conversation with her sister in the kitchen, I didn't realize he had already arrived. He was in the office, getting some documents. He heard everything they said about you." Eleanor felt her legs weaken. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding the shawl against her chest. "That's why the raised voices this morning." "Yes, he confronted Mrs. Deborah as soon as she woke up." It was a terrible argument. Then they left together, she crying and he furious. And now? What's going to happen? Anthony sat beside her, respectfully keeping some distance. "I'm not sure, but I heard him call his lawyer. He mentioned something about reviewing the terms of the prenuptial agreement." The following hours passed with agonizing slowness. Eleanor returned to her back room, where she remained withdrawn, clutching the recovered shawl as if it were a shield against all the world's evils. Around 5 in the afternoon, when the movement in the house intensified with the arrival of the last suppliers, Rita appeared again. "Mrs. Eleanor, Dr. Bernard is looking for you." "Where is he?" "In the back garden near the arbor. He asked you to go discreetly." With her heart pounding, Eleanor crossed the house, trying to go unnoticed amidst the bustling staff. Reaching the garden, she spotted her son's silhouette sitting alone on the wooden bench under the structure covered with flowering vines. Bernard stood up when he saw her. His eyes were red and tired, but he offered a genuine smile. "Mother," a single word loaded with so much meaning. They embraced for a long time in silence, as if words were insufficient to express everything they felt. "Forgive me," he finally said, his voice choked. "Forgive me for not realizing sooner." "There's nothing to forgive, my son." "Yes, there is. I was blind, naive, negligent. I let the person who should honor you treat you like you didn't know. I should have suspected. The signs were there, your sadness, your isolation. But I was so busy with business, so caught up in the image of success I built, that I ignored the most important person in my life. They sat down again, and Bernard held his mother's hands in his, examining the marks of work and time with reverence. These hands raised me, fed me, sewed my clothes when we didn't have money to buy new ones. How could I allow them to be disrespected in my own home? Eleanor caressed her son's face, wiping away a stubborn tear that trickled down. What's going to happen now, son? Bernard took a deep breath, composing himself. Deborah and I had a long conversation, or rather a long argument. She tried to deny everything at first, but when I mentioned the recordings... The recordings? You know about them? Anthony gave them to me last night as soon as I arrived. But they weren't necessary anymore. I had heard enough with my own ears. And today's party? Will it be cancelled? No, Bernard replied with surprising firmness. The party will happen exactly as planned, with a small alteration to the script. His eyes, once sad, now shone with determination. It's time for the truth, Mother. Time for everyone to see who truly upholds the values of this family. At 7:30 that evening, the Mendonça mansion was already welcoming its first guests. Strategically placed lights highlighted the imposing architecture, while a string quartet played softly at the entrance. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and elaborate canapes, and in the background, the view of the Manhattan skyline completed the perfect setting. Deborah, stunning in a navy blue haute couture gown, greeted guests with her most radiant smile as if nothing had happened. Beside her, Christine watched everything with poorly disguised nervousness, drinking glasses of champagne at a worrying speed. The real shock for those present was to see Bernard descend the main staircase, accompanied not by his wife, but by his mother. Eleanor was not wearing the deplorable grey dress Deborah had set aside. Instead, she wore an elegant emerald green ensemble, perfectly suited to her age and position as the host's mother. Her grey hair was simply styled, and around her neck, a discreet pearl necklace, a last-minute gift from her son. But what really drew attention was the wool shawl on her shoulders, the same one Deborah had confiscated and hidden. It was clean and mended, and Eleanor wore it with pride, like a silent symbol of resistance. A murmur ran through the hall as Bernard led his mother to the center, completely ignoring his wife, who watched the scene with growing horror. "Good evening. Everyone," he began, his voice amplified by the sound system. "I thank each of you for your presence on this special night. As you know, this event was organized to celebrate the achievements of the Mendonça Foundation over the past year and to announce our new projects." He paused, looking directly at Deborah before continuing. "But before we talk about business and philanthropy, I would like to pay special tribute to the person who made all of this possible. The woman who, alone and with minimal resources, raised a man capable of dreaming big and working hard." Silence fell over the hall. All eyes alternated between Eleanor, visibly moved, and Deborah, whose face lost color with each passing second. "My mother, Eleanor Mendonça, was not born with a silver spoon. She did not have access to formal education beyond elementary school, but what she lacked in opportunities, she made up for in determination and love. When my father left us, she alone took on the responsibility of raising a son. She worked 16 hours a day as a seamstress to pay for my studies." Bernard made a point of highlighting every detail of his mother's simple and honorable life: the sleepless nights sewing to deliver orders, the sacrifice of selling family jewelry to pay for his college, the silent pride when she saw him graduate. Some may look at her calloused hands and see only a manual laborer. I see the hands that shaped my character, that taught me the value of honest work, that never reached out to ask, but always to give. Silent tears streamed down the faces of several guests, especially those who, like Bernard, came from humble beginnings, but preferred to hide that fact in their social circles. Deborah, sensing the change in the atmosphere, tried to approach her husband to take her place beside him, but Bernard discreetly signaled to a security guard who prevented her from advancing. "Recently," he continued, his voice now laden with contained emotion, "I discovered that not everyone in this house treated my mother with the respect she deserves, that her presence was seen as an inconvenience, an unwanted reminder of origins that some would prefer to forget. Confused glances swept the room. Christine, pale, began to move discreetly towards the exit. As of today, I announce a fundamental change in the structure of this family and this company. The Mendonça Foundation, which bears our surname, will now have Mrs. Eleanor Mendonça, my mother, as its honorary president. 50% of the annual profits will be directed to training programs for women seamstresses in disadvantaged communities, a tribute to the work that sustained our family in difficult times. Spontaneous applause filled the hall. Deborah, finally understanding the dimension of the situation, discreetly tried to leave the room, but was again stopped by the security guard. And to conclude, Bernard said, now looking directly at his wife, I would like to ask everyone present, respect your origins. Honor those who sacrificed everything so that you could be here today. Because in the end, it is not titles, possessions, or appearances that define our worth. It is our ability to recognize and thank those who shaped us. Eleanor, moved, squeezed her son's hand tightly. In her eyes, there was no triumph or satisfaction with Deborah's public humiliation, only relief and a deep gratitude for finally being recognized and respected. The party continued, but with a completely different atmosphere than Deborah had planned. Instead of superficial conversations about status and acquisitions, many guests approached Eleanor to hear her stories, genuinely interested in the journey of that simple woman who had raised a successful businessman. Rita and the other staff served with poorly disguised smiles of satisfaction. Anthony, specially invited by Bernard to participate as a guest and not as an employee, chatted animatedly with businessmen interested in his gardening techniques. As for Deborah, she remained in a corner of the hall, isolated, watching her empire of appearances crumble around her. Christine had disappeared completely, abandoning her sister to her own devices. The day after the party, while social newspapers highlighted Bernard Mendonça's moving tribute to his mother of humble origin, Eleanor packed her bags. Not to return to the back room or to a nursing home in the Bronx, as Deborah had planned, but to accompany her son on a special trip. We're going to spend a few weeks at the beach house in the Hamptons. Just the two of us and the children, Bernard explained. Time to reconnect, for me to hear all the stories I missed during these years of absence. And Deborah? She won't be coming, he replied dryly. Our lawyers are finalizing the terms of the separation. Your apartment, by the way, remains intact. I managed to reverse the fraudulent sale she tried to make. Eleanor felt immense relief, knowing that her little corner still existed. Not that she intended to return. The renewed companionship with her son and grandchildren was too precious to give up now. But knowing she had her own place, a space that carried her history and identity, brought a sense of security she had lost in recent months. When the car that would take them to the Hamptons was ready to depart, Eleanor made one last stop in the garden. Anthony watered the orchids, whistling a cheerful tune. Thank you, she said simply. I only did what was right, Mrs. Eleanor. You did more than many would. You risked your job, your livelihood. Some things are more important than a salary, aren't they? Dignity is one of them. Eleanor smiled, perfectly understanding the meaning of those words. She took a small package from her purse. I made this for you. It's not much, but it's from the heart. Inside the package, Anthony found a delicately embroidered handkerchief with his initials and small orchids on the borders. A refined piece of needlework, made with those calloused hands that carried so much history. It's perfect, he said, moved. I will cherish it. On the way to the Hamptons, sitting beside Bernard, while the grandchildren slept in the back seat, Eleanor watched the landscape gradually change, buildings giving way to open spaces, grey being replaced by the green of coastal vegetation. You know, son, she said after a long silence, for a moment I thought I had lost you forever. Bernard took her hand, squeezing it gently. You never lost me, Mother. I was the one who had lost myself, trying to be someone I'm not, living a life of appearances that distanced me from what truly matters. And what truly matters? Honesty, authenticity, never forgetting where we came from and who helped us get here. That's what you always taught me, wasn't it? Eleanor smiled, leaning back in the comfortable seat. The wool shawl, a symbol of all they had been through, rested on her shoulders as a silent reminder that true wealth lies not in possessions or status, but in the values we carry and the people who genuinely care about us. In the mansion they left behind, Deborah watched their departure from the bedroom window, now immense and empty without Bernard's presence. The shadow of pride, which for so long had made her feel superior and powerful, now left her completely alone, surrounded only by cold luxury that neither warmed her heart nor filled the emptiness of her soul. The car disappeared around the bend in the road, carrying Eleanor to a new chapter of her life, a chapter where her simplicity was no longer a source of shame, but of admiration and respect. A chapter where, finally, she could be who she truly was, without masks or pretensions, loved by the son she had raised with so much sacrifice, and by the grandchildren who would now learn from her example. And in the end, there were no winners or losers in the silent war that had been waged in that house, only the confirmation of a timeless truth, that pride, when used to diminish others and build a false image, inevitably leads to a fall. And that humility, when accompanied by dignity and genuine love, always finds its place in the sun, even after the longest and darkest storm. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Mrs. Eleanor's story has touched your hearts. To continue this journey of emotions, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about overcoming adversity, dignity, and family love. Find this selection by clicking the link to the left of the video. If this narrative about a mother's silent strength and a son's redemption moved you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexities of human relationships and the values that truly matter in life. Share your own experiences in the comments. Have you ever faced situations where you had to defend the dignity of someone you love? How did you overcome challenges imposed by prejudice and appearances? We look forward to hearing your stories too.